Episode 5. The manuscript pages, no radios, just the manuscript pages. Only the manuscript pages. Seems to be like 7 or 8 of them, and only missed one. I guess going out of the way, all that when I was playing it, got something out of it.
Nightingale tried to make sense of the manuscript. It was disjointed and strange. He didn't understand half of it, but it all rang true. Impossibly true. He took out his hip flask when he reached the page that described how he reached the page that made him take out his hip flask. It wasn't the booze that made his mind reel. Nightingale felt the situation veering out of his control, but the gun at least felt steady in his hands. He was ready to fire, resolved that he would let this happen over his dead body. And yet he hesitated. He had seen this moment before, read it in the page. He was transfixed by the déjà vu and the horror that he was a character in a story someone had written. Then the monstrous presence burst in behind him and dragged him into the night. The darkness that wore Barbara Jagger's face was furious. The story in the manuscript had been making it stronger all the time, but now the light had set the writer free and hurt it, weakened it. It was only a matter of days before the dark presence would be strong again, but meanwhile, it would be difficult to recapture the writer. Cynthia Weaver worked hard, following her obsessive rituals, sometimes fighting them, always giving in to them in the end. She haunted the halls of Bright Falls abandoned power plant. She marked her caches with light-sensitive paint that could only be seen by eyes that had been touched by darkness and saved by light like she'd been. She was preparing defenses and supply lines for the war she knew would come. The war between the forces of light and darkness. For it to be free, the dark presence needed the writer to finish the story. Again and again, the story let it get frustratingly close to the writer without letting it capture him. It was bound by the events depicted in the manuscript, but it could pursue the writer indirectly, put others on the task and stop those who would help him. It took over everything in its path, made them its puppets, and sent them after Alan Wake. Alice had screamed until she had no voice left to scream. Around her, the darkness was alive. It was cold and wet and malevolent and without end. She was a prisoner, trapped in the dark place. The terror would have burned her mind out, but one thing made her hang on. She could sense Alan in the dark. She could hear him. She could see the words he was writing as flickering shadows. He sensed her too. He was trying to work his way to her. Barry was in his element, making calls, making things happen, even if he didn't entirely know what those things were. He wouldn't let the hot sheriff chick down. Even if every noise he heard from outside, and he heard plenty, made him jump. He had only paused to text Al a message, told him to hurry up. Suddenly, Barry froze in mid-dial. A window broke somewhere in the building, and then the lights went out. The story I had written in the cabin had come true. Touched by the dark presence, I had written a horror story, but the end was still missing. The story was incomplete, and the last unfinished page of the manuscript still sat in the typewriter in the cabin study. If I could get back there, if I could read the page, then I could write my own ending to this story and save Alice. Sarah was almost starting to relax. Maybe they could turn this into a win yet. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound, like a table saw gone wild, as 100 birds made out of shadows swarmed into the rotor. The chopper bucked wildly and the board lit up, telling her what she already knew. They were going down. Barry Wheeler screamed next to her. Thomas Zane knew he had to remove all that had made this horror possible, including himself. That was the only way to banish the dark presence he had unleashed and now looked at him through the eyes of his dead love. But he also knew that despite his best efforts, it might someday return. So even as he wrote himself and his work out of existence, he added a loophole as insurance, an exception to the rule. Anything of his stored in a shoebox would remain. Making her way through the water pipe alone, Cynthia was angry at the writer. Foolish young man, taking unnecessary risks. And the way he broke the rules. Didn't he understand what was at stake? Since the terrible days in the 70s, she hadn't wavered once, as hard as it had been. She was tired of protecting the town all these long years, and now only wanted to rest.
I think they're the two biggest ones kind of explain where things were going after episode 5. Pretty much explains what the darkness is going through and basically what Alan's going through, which is interesting, I guess. It also says the darkness intentionally picks kind of important people to basically consume and take control of. That those were like the boss characters, but they could have something big in store for the next one, I suppose. Cynthia seems to be kind of like the local aficionado, I guess, kind of the expert on all matters light and dark in Bright Springs. I mean Bright Falls. And Negative Hippie actually brought up that he's thought that only people that were that had seen the darkness could see certain things in the light. You got that spot on, actually. They also bring up times from the 40 years ago, I guess, in the 1970s, referring to the Anderson, referring to when Thomas Zane pretty much made the darkness, kind of. Not necessarily made it, but kind of was the first one to embrace it. And they also talk about him basically removing himself from this world. But eventually it got too much, and he had to take measures to make sure that it didn't, take over everything. Also, Alice is brought up probably for the first time, I think, in his manuscripts, at least that I've seen. At least in terms of like current location, and when there's always kind of stuff like beforehand. Because Hartman said, like, just playing out that she was dead. He hadn't seen her in a long time. Because before this, Alan just kind of, I don't want to say assumed, but he definitely figured that Alice was okay and trapped someone in the darkness. And then that manuscript page, that's exactly what's going on. And she's holding on, and Alan's holding on, and now it's just, he's got to go get her. I think probably the real reason why I keep on going over these manuscripts for myself, so I can know more, is because they show a lot of things that happen kind of away from Alan, kind of away from the main game. And there's one big one, and I felt bad for Negative Hippie because I pretty much just kind of had to tell him about it because we were sort of confused. I pretty much just had to tell him about it because we didn't really know what was going on. Negative Hippie?
Yeah. If they say just shut up.
Episode 6. One quick little note that I got from the manuscripts. Nightingale, the FBI agent character, and we were kind of confused that he shows up.
He was Barry.
He shoots Alan a few times, or shoots at Alan a few times, and then he arrests Alan, and then he's just gone, taken away. The reason, from what I understand from the manuscript pages, what tells me, is that what was making him go after Alan was the manuscript. If you recall, he was reading the manuscript and he had it right, and then he also said that there was a conspiracy to kill a federal agent. The federal agent was him, because in the book he dies.
Yeah.
In this book that Alan writes, dies, and so he read that, and there's also parts about how he was reading the book in the book.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. So that's the reason why he was after Alan, is because Alan wrote a story when she dies.
Oh, so he's like reads it as like a manifesto of Alan Wake to kill, like
he's because
or is it life imitating art, basically?
It's that.
Okay.
And he's gonna get murdered, he thinks, by Alan Wake because Alan wrote a story with him dying in it.
Oh, so he thinks that the manuscripts are not just normal.
Well, he knows they are, because in the manuscript it says that like I said, there's pages about him looking at the manuscript while he was looking at it.
Yeah, that's why he thinks that they're like otherworldly, basically. There's something. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, and then by reading that he dies in them, that was that character.
Yeah. It'd be really interesting if we just saw that instead of having to like play it a second time and be like, oh, okay, I'm in that mode and now I understand the plot.
Right. I don't think it's necessarily like it's. I think the thing with Nightingale is that I think it shows how much, because it's weird because the manuscripts for him are necessary.
Yeah.
For everything else, it's been a matter of telling stuff that's going to happen in next episodes.
Yeah.
And explaining stuff that happened before that never gets mentioned, which is kind of bad though. But you think there'd be a lot more to it.
Yeah.
In this game because it's based on a book, right? So you think that those pages will have a lot of things going for it. I think that's what they're trying to go for.
Yeah.
With that, I think that's the reason why they're so essential for certain things.
Honestly, I think the manuscript pages should have been something you always collect, not something you have to like look out for. But it's just like, kind of as you get them, you read them, and then okay, that's just like what's happening, and then eventually you start seeing things that aren't happening. Like you say, like you're reading a page about how Nightingale is reading a manuscript,
right? But
once he shoots at you, you eventually find a page that says that Nightingale shoots at you. Right. And so eventually you'll start reading about things in the manuscripts that you're not aware of.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a good point. The one thing that I have to say about that is reading the manuscripts while you play the game sucks.
That's true, but from a storytelling perspective, it's a lot better.
Right, you would think so. Yep. I think that's what I guess that's what they wanted to do with that.
Yeah, but because like making it like you have to achieve a better story.
Yeah,
you're trying to make me work too hard to enjoy you.
Sort of, I guess. I think the way I look at it is like, okay, I get rewarded with story by going out to fighting these things. Yeah. Because some of these things are way out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, like we figured out when we played the episode 5 was that these manuscript pages can be as much as like a good minute walk away from where you're supposed to go.
It's big pacing problems.
And and then plus reading those things as they come out is a big problem too.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why these things are important, you know, is because that's what it's supposed to be. It was supposed to be like, oh, I read this. Oh, it happened. Kind of stuff. And in fact, I never even noticed that. I never even thought about it. I always kind of assumed that this entire thing was kind of a book.
Yeah.
And then so we just happened to be finding pages of it. But now that's kind of what they're going after.